N. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Today's webinar is titled Building Online Community and Connections Through Regular and Substantive Interaction. My name is Anwar Hijaz. I am a political science faculty member at Saddleback College. I'm actually going to pause for a second at Cell just to make sure the interpreters are pinned, just to make sure that everyone has access. Itself, you don't mind? Okay, perfect. All right, I guess I'll start again. Thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Dr. Anwar Hijaz. I am a political science faculty member at Saddleback College, and I'm a CVC at One faculty mentor. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today, and I want to start off by introducing our amazing facilitator. Christella Button works at Diablo Valley College as an instructional designer and instructor. Her focus on online accessibility and equitable course design allow her to support instructors as they create innovative and inclusive learning spaces in all modalities. She finds teaching to be an awesome adventure, helping her put her work's focus into practice, and reminding her that there is always something to learn, even if you are the teacher. I wanted to share a few announcements before we do get started as well. During today's webinar, we will be sharing out a survey at the end of the webinar. Please take a few moments. It should just only take a few minutes to fill it out. It's very helpful to allow CVC to continue to improve on their programming. And then another thing I wanted to let you all know is that if you do need proof of attendance for flex credit or professional advancement, please stay until the end, complete the survey, and request a copy of the responses of the Google Form documentation. We want to also thank our ASL interpreters for being here today. We deeply appreciate your support and helping making this session accessible. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it to you, Priscilla.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. I put the link to the slides in the chat. So if you are interested in following along, please do. But I am Christella Button. My pronouns are she, her. And as mentioned, I work at Diablo Valley College as an instructional designer there, and I also teach part-time. But my background is actually in K-12 education, where I taught a lot of theater and a lot of English for many years. And that's kind of where a lot of my theory and pedagogical practice comes from. What I love most about course design is building for accessibility and making sure that all that we do is inclusive of all of our students, our learners, their backgrounds, and their cultural experiences. I choose to live by the motto guide on the side as opposed to sage on the stage. So hopefully there are lots of things that I can share for you today to get you ready for RSI and community. I want to put another link in the chat. If you have a moment and you're interested in helping us build some community as a group here, I've built a Padlet board for us. Oh, no, it shouldn't be private. Hold on. Well, hopefully it works. It worked yesterday, and this will make me sad if it doesn't work, but that's technology, right? So I can't raise my volume. If you guys can turn up your volume, that would be great. This is about as high as I can go. So, and I'm sitting right in front of my laptop. So if you can turn it up, that would be really helpful. Thank you. You should be able to access the Padlet. And I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time. If you'd like to help build community outside of this presentation, feel free to add to it. It is a space for us to ask questions, to share community, to come together in a webinar format. Sometimes that can be difficult because there are so many of us here. So I wanted to create a space for you to add to if you would like to. I do hope that it works, but I'm not sure. Yeah, go ahead.
It did. I saw in the settings that it said if you have the link, it's still private. It
I definitely
said
changed
no
that.
access. I just saw
Being
that
so
right now.
sad. I don't know why that's working.
I just saw it right now. I think you were on one of the tabs.
Which one? Was it this one?
Uh, Try permissions right there. It says no access.
Okay. Oh, this is new. I don't like that.
Yeah, now that hopefully should work.
Okay. If it doesn't work, then we can use the chat. I just wanted to create a space for us to have community in this larger webinar format because sometimes it feels like I am just here talking at you and I wanted to give you a space to share some thoughts. Um, if it's not working, go ahead and use the chat. But our community, really, I just wanted to be able to share what you are most interested in. So I'll add this in there so that you can put it in the chat if you'd like to. If it works, great. Feel free to add it there. Thank you. If not, add it in the chat. You can see part of using technology when you are creating engaging spaces is being flexible. And so sometimes we just have to roll with it. But this is one of those things that is good to learn as a community, right? When we build community around online learning, we learn the ins and outs and the ways in which we can support each other and make things easier for others to access. So, what I want to offer you today is a little overview of what RSI is, how we can use RSI to build community no matter the modality, although our focus will be online. This can apply in all modalities. How AI and RSI may sort of lend to one another. And then I want to show you some bits of RSI in action. What does it look like to use RSI to build community and vice versa? And then, of course, share some resources along the way. All right. So I do love, and thank you for those of you who are already doing this. I do love to know when folks are following along or when they found something interesting or just really want to shout out during a presentation. Again, during a webinar, sometimes it can feel a little isolating. So I invite you to use those Zoom reactions. You've got emojis, you've got those reaction buttons, you have the chat. Please leverage the chat. I'll answer questions that are pertinent in the moment. And also I've built in a couple of spaces for questions during the presentation. But please feel free to utilize the chat or the Q&A. And you can access the slides that I put the link in the chat to. If you are finding you're clicking through and not all of those links are valid, that is because some of them are from my own classes. And I know, using Canvas at a different college and a different class, you don't have access to everybody's course materials. So some of those are intentionally blocked, and I will share screen and show them to you so you can see the example. All right. So I want to start with a short overview of what RSI is and where it is, which, like, massive hint, it is everywhere in all that we do, no matter the modality. So here is the official definition of what RSI is according to what is our 4CD, which is the district I work in, our board policy, but mirrors the ACCJC's policy as well. And I'm not going to read it word for word, but I will pull out a couple of things for you. It just means that substantive interaction is engaging students in teaching, learning, and assessment. So students are engaged, hopefully authentically, in the learning that is happening, and they are able to display their engagement through assessment, through feedback that they've received from you, improvement that they have made, group discussion, group work, things like that. So that is the basics of RSI, and you likely have a distance education coordinator at your campus who can support you if you are new to understanding what regular and substantive interaction is. I would definitely suggest reaching out to them and getting some one-on-one support. What it is not is computer generated or AI generated feedback. Part of RSI requires that the instructor give the student feedback that is genuine instructor created feedback. So we want to draw the line there and make that clear. It is not auto-generated feedback. It is not recorded webinars or videos for students to go home and watch or to watch during class and get their learning that way. It should be interactive. So whether they're watching a video, there's something to do afterwards that requires them to interact with the material. So that could be questions, it could be a writing prompt. There is something that asks them to interact with that material that they have viewed. Hold on one second. Okay, so this is also not correspondence. You are the instructor, you are reaching out to students, students are able to access you and know when and how to do that. It also appears in the face-to-face classroom. So again, it is in all modalities. While it is a requirement for online learning, we see RSI in our face-to-face classes because it is more than just being present. Engagement is not sitting in a seat and being there for the scheduled time. It can be those spaces where we have group work happening, where we have students responding to prompts live, discussions, Socratic seminar, if you are taking place in Socratic seminars in your course. Those are all examples of RSI in face-to-face. And we can duplicate or replicate those things online as well. In those face-to-face spaces, we're also making sure that each student is provided with feedback. They are interacting with each other as well as the instructor. And we are allowing for transparency of expectations. So we're telling our students clearly, this is what we expect you to do when you participate in this class. That's an example of RSI. So when it comes to RSI and community, I like to use this Brene Brown quote to display vulnerability because that is where community begins. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. So when we want to build community with our students, we want to ensure that we are first being vulnerable so that we can meet them where they are at with what they need. Let me define what I mean by community so that we can start to maybe think about how do we build this in our own courses. That means making comfortable, safe spaces that include students' perspectives, experiences, and backgrounds in our courses specifically. We want to build these materials that allow students to enter no matter what their background knowledge is. So it is built from a student-first perspective. I read this quote on what used to be Twitter years ago, but it was something about building with a student in mind versus having the student figure it out afterwards. And I really love that perspective because students are able to enter the learning because they know it was made for them, as opposed to, well, how do I figure out how to get to this page or where is this at? Everything is transparent and clear. So that brings us to transparency forward. Building with students' expectations in mind first allows us to sort of answer those questions before they come up. So if you think about your own course right now, which module or which unit do you know you get a lot of questions about? And maybe take a pause and think about, where's one or two things I can add in that space that might answer those questions before they come to my email inbox? That's a form of transparency, which helps us build community. You've made something clear to students. They feel a little bit more comfy in that space and maybe a little bit safer to ask questions if they get confused, because the basics are taken care of first. Um, Vulnerability leads to connection. When you give a little bit of yourself in that presentation or that live class or recording, students get to know who you are and feel a little bit more connected to you as a human behind the screen. Um, Especially in spaces like this, when you're having a large webinar, you want to make sure you sort of pepper in a little bit of who you are, so people can get to know you and feel a little bit more comfortable. It's all about that whole student care as well. We'll talk a lot about building community through on-the-spot support, but making sure that students are aware of mental health support, campus support resources, or district-wide support resources without having to ask. You never know when that student is going to need to access that. So having it in spaces like announcements or on assignments where students can just directly access that support without having to ask is a huge burden lifter for students. It allows us to create a safety net for them before they even need it. So if they do fall a little bit, there's something there to catch them. So why do we even build the community? I feel like most of us probably naturally want to build that community, but we haven't maybe addressed the why. Why is it so important? It's important that students feel comfortable to be their authentic selves. It allows them space to grow and feel free in learning and having ownership over that learning. It can encourage creativity and support extra focus. When they have a minute to be their whole selves, they can focus a little bit more on what is exciting and what is in front of them, and so that they can produce and show you what they know. It not only connects students to each other, but also to the course material. They have a little bit more ownership over the content. Even though it is you, the instructor, giving them that information, they are able to digest it in a way that makes sense to them, which gives them ownership and success. And working a lot, especially with high school students in my previous role, that little bit of success builds confidence in education that maybe they didn't have before. And they feel that much more comfortable to connect with you, the instructor, because they know you are there to support them. They know you are there for their success. So a little bit of failure is okay when they know they feel supported and safe. And when we make those connections, we all learn. In my bio, one of the things about being a teacher that's great for me, I love learning and I want to learn from my students. So when I'm vulnerable with them and I create this community, I'm able to learn from them just as they are able to learn from me. So we sort of talked about the why and the background, but I want to leave you with solutions. I don't want to just ask these big questions and say, figure it out yourself. So how can we build community? It's all about being intentional, making those spaces. So I had an attempt this morning, which like technology didn't love me trying to, but I wanted to build an intentional space for you to have community outside of this webinar if you wanted to. Not that anybody's required to use it, but it's an intentional space that is there for you to build community if you would like to. What we can build in our own courses, if you're teaching a hybrid course or high flex course, think about that on-campus to online, back to on-campus loop. How are you closing that loop? How are you creating transparency around participation expectations? When things are made really clear to students, they can start to build community because those boundaries have been made clear. They can get creative within those boundaries and start to reach out, talk to each other, talk to you, and build community. And sometimes hybrid can get lost in that because it is a loop. And we have to remind ourselves when we're teaching hybrid, everything connects on campus, online, on campus, just one continual loop. Discussion boards are a great space to start if you are new to teaching online or new to technology. It's a pretty safe place to start. Canvas has an inherent discussion board feature. If you have not used it, I highly recommend starting there. You can build your discussion boards and get students talking. One complaint I often hear is, well, my students don't respond the way I want them to. Show them what you want. Give them a template, give them an example, give them a fill in the blank sample, and show them what it looks like to have academic discourse in your class, and then start to slowly peel that away later. Giving them the stepping stones to get to where you want them is one way that we can release the burden and help students authentically build community in these discussion board spaces. And I like to acknowledge there is discussion board fatigue. Absolutely. A discussion board all the time can sometimes be fatiguing for the instructor and the student. So this is where we can start to pepper in different things. Like I used Padlet today. You could definitely do that. Of course, thinking about accessible access for our students with disabilities. But you can also move to things like digital annotation or social annotation. There are a couple of different tools out there that allow you to do that. And of course, you can do that in a Google Doc or a Word doc as well. But thinking about how can we get students to chat with each other academically around a text or a piece of media to get them excited about whatever they're learning at the moment. But all of that can come back to a discussion board as well. Because that fatigue exists, we have the ability and the reality of having to recreate that discussion board so it's not repetitive. It's not just a summary every week of what they've read with quotes. That can be draining for us to grade as well. So think about how we can ask our students to take a little bit of that load and show us what they learned. Display something, make a video, find something in the real world that connects to whatever they read and share it with us. I like to use creative and reflective assessments. So previously I taught English. Currently I teach computer information systems. So two completely different worlds. But I didn't want to lose that creative spark. There's still a lot of creativity within computer information systems. I can ask students to review things that are happening in the real digital world right now and get creative about solutions. In those same discussion boards, I'm asking them to read an article that's of something that happened in the local community and respond using the knowledge that they have about this technology system. How can it support? How can it answer? How can it address? And it gets them that much more connected in their outside community as well as the one within the course that we are building. Student-made or instructor-made videos. I make a lot of videos because I want to ensure that my students have transparent access to whatever expectation I have. And if I don't tell them what that is, they won't know. So I like to do both. I make videos and I add text. I will get to a point in the semester where sometimes I don't have time for a video this week, and I'm honest with them. I'm transparent with my community, and I say, I don't have the space to make a video this week, but here's my text write-up. If you need one-on-one support, head to my office hours or things like that. Once you build that community, students are accepting of the flexibility that you need sometimes as well. But those student-made videos allow students agency over what they've learned and to express what they know in a way that is their own. They've created it, they've built it, they can share it. And once you build that safe space within your classroom community, they're more willing to take risks and make videos and put themselves out there, especially in that asynchronous space where they sometimes are invisible. As I mentioned before, you can also use Google Docs or slides or Word, PowerPoint, any of those you can use for annotation. You can use to have students highlight, share, things like that. I use them a lot in my computer information systems courses, where I just want students to be able to annotate and share thoughts directly with me. It wasn't necessarily a whole class community moment, it was a moment with me. And I wanted their personal thoughts on something. So I shared a Google Doc with each individual student. And if you know how to use Google, you know that you can force make a copy. And I love that feature. If you don't, Google it. Force make a copy is great. I force made a copy for each student so I could get their personal perspective on a really interesting subject. And I just didn't think that we had time to do it as a whole class, but I thought this was one way to build community, and it worked really well. And then, of course, classroom community rituals, which we will dive a little bit deeper into here shortly. But this is something where you can create moments for students to be themselves that are not always academic. Sometimes they just need a space to be and to connect around things that are happening outside in their own lives, on campus, anywhere. So we can create those spaces for them to do that. I feel like I've said this before, but RSI is community every time. Whenever we are open around expectations and we've created something with student success in mind first, we can build intentional spaces for that success. We have to know what our end game is when we're creating it so that students can meet that success rate, right? If we don't know what it is, how do they know? And one of those ways that we can lift that burden is to give examples, is to give them an outline and create comfort around what we can share. We can't always give them the answers, but we can tell them what the format looks like. I can give them a document that has the format that they can copy and then use to create the output. I can lift that little bit of burden for them. It gives them space to allow for scary things. I'm asking them to read about technology as it pertains to social justice. That's a big ask. So I want to lift the burden where I can. I don't need them to worry about what the slides look like because I made an example that they can copy and build out their 4 slides from. It doesn't have answers on it, but it gives them the format so they can produce the content. I am always an honest learner. When things go wrong, obviously, I am happy to tell you about it. And I like to create that space for my students. It's not that I love to embarrass myself. It's that I want my students to know this happens and we can get through it together. We can move forward. It's not the end of our day. We can figure it out. And when they see you do that, they feel more confident that they can do that. So giving them the space to know this is what happens in the real world and how we can move through it without losing our footing is a really important practice. It's one of those non-academic things that really comes in handy when we're creating community and safe spaces. The more comfortable they are, the more willing they are to participate. I am that student who will never say a word in your entire class. You won't even know I was there. I will come early, I will leave, and you won't know who I am. So unless that space is super comfortable for me, I am never going to answer a question. I'm never going to raise my hand. And so, knowing myself, I like to design my classes with students like that in mind because I want them to feel safe enough to participate. Doesn't mean they have to, but I want to create those safe spaces. It's about intentional spaces for these students. And the more they participate, obviously, the more they meet RSI, which means you are meeting RSI, which is great, especially if you are looking to build more engagement in your online learning spaces. So I want to pause really quick. This is one of those intentional question spaces that I've built in. So I have some thoughts for you here, but I also wanted to give you the opportunity to ask questions. I know there were some in the chat, so you can let me know, Anwar, if there's anything to
Yeah,
answer. And then feel
yeah.
free if you want to respond to these in the chat, feel free as well. Go ahead.
I'm going to try to speak low because someone mentioned in the chat because everyone's volume is up really high. So hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm screaming. There was a comment from Teresa saying, I would like ideas for how to encourage more students to post video responses and discussions. When they have an audio option or a video option, most choose audio.
Yes. And to be honest, I would too. Um, it's for me, my perspective, it's hard to address that. It depends on student safety and connectivity to their community, right? So think about the work that you've done up to that point to build that safe space. Were there other spaces that they could try this out as an option? Was there a lot of resources there for them to practice and learn before it became a graded environment? Um, I find that I have a little bit more success when students are given the opportunity to practice before it is a requirement. And I let them know, like, I do require videos actually quite a bit in my class because it's technology based. So I want to see them using the technology. And sometimes I want to actually see them. So I have let them know at the beginning of class, in my very first module, in my syllabus, in my welcome letter, you will be using videos as a product of learning in this class. I'm going to make them with you. I'm going to help you do them. We're going to practice them first. And eventually, you'll get almost every student to participate. It takes time. So lessen that load in the beginning and give them practice opportunities. Let them know it's coming so that they have the chance to prepare. And put yourself out there too. Make videos that aren't so polished, that just make a quick announcement video every once in a while that doesn't look beautiful. Unblur your background and let them see the mess so they know it's okay to be present on video.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Katie also asked, I would like to know how to better use the groups feature in Canvas. It's so clunky.
It is clunky and I don't use it. um, I don't know that there is a better way. And if somebody has a better way in the chat, please feel free. I have also found it really clunky
Pardon,
and I haven't been able.
pardon the interpreter. What is clunky? The captioning, I couldn't understand. What is clunky?
The Canvas groups.
Canvas groups. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I haven't found a way to successfully use it, to be honest. So I ended up sort of doing my own thing and just making groups in one discussion board and having them work as teams in one discussion board. It just kind of depends on the students that you have and what you're teaching that semester. I am sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. Any other questions?
There's no other questions unless I missed something, but there's a lot of really good, people are sharing great
Yes.
ideas.
Please share ideas. I want to read these too when I'm done.
Um, Christy asked, is VoiceThread integrated into Canvas Gradebook?
That is not a tool that we have, so I'm not sure. Your best place to ask would probably be whoever your distance education coordinator is, to get support on individual tools. I have not used that one before. I will say, just on an accessibility note, if you are asking students to make video and audio, it is really nice when you also include accessibility as something that they should be doing. I started it as optional as we start making these things, and then I require it towards the end. But captions or transcripts, depending on if you're making video, then you'll have edited captions. If you're making audio, you have a transcript. So that way every student has access without having to ask. Something to consider as you start building these. Awesome. I see one comment, students have their own private discussion boards. Absolutely. You can give them spaces to just be a student sometimes, right? To interact. I created a space like that and it turned into like sharing old movies. Somebody was really into Charlie Chaplin, and that's okay. It's not related, but they had a moment of connection and I was here for it. So that's the kind of thing you want to see. Um, so for the sake of time, I'm going to move forward, but if you have other stuff you want to add in the chat, please absolutely do. Because I want to get to the last slides here, which are examples, and I'm hoping they will be helpful. I do want to mention the moment, which right now is just AI everywhere. We know things are shifting as education always does. When I first started teaching, smartwatches were like everybody was mad at smartwatches. Students are going to cheat with their smartwatch. There's always something, right? It's the internet before that. We have to think about it in a global landscape. There's always something, and something will always change. So let's leave our biases aside for a moment and just acknowledge that technology is rapidly changing and updating, and it will continue to do that. Information is available 24/7 at a rapid pace coming at you from every app now. That makes things different for students who were sitting in front of you even 6 years ago. It's totally different. There's a consistent stress and anxiety overload. A lot of us feel it. Our students are feeling it too. And then put that on top of taking 5 classes, 6 classes, trying to get transfer to a 4-year. There's a lot of extra stress. And we don't know their stories. We don't know their stories unless we create spaces for those. So we have to acknowledge that in what we build in our own courses. Doom scrolling leaves little room for joy unless it's intentionally built in. At the beginning of the pandemic, I found myself teaching fully online, a brand new district, a brand new course I had never taught before, and things were not feeling joyful. And I took a leap of faith and I let my students know that. And so every week in my video, I would just comment on one thing I found joyful that week. And they started doing it too, which was really precious, but it allowed us to naturally build community. And I'll have to say, it wasn't even intentional on my part. I just had a microphone and somewhere that I could say what was happening. And I used it and it was really thinking about myself, to be honest. But I didn't realize how many other people needed that. And sometimes that's what's really special about building community. They didn't know they needed to hear it either. They didn't know it was okay to be honest with how unjoyful things were and how we could find some small joys. So that was a really special connection that year. But it led me to this. How can we lift the burden for our learning community in our classroom spaces? There are so many things out there. How can we lift just one or two? How can we make things better in our own space? And how can we utilize technology without it being a burden? Whenever I am working with somebody who is new to technology, my suggestion is one thing at a time, one piece of technology. And I leave that with you to take with you as well. Even I do that. I love technology, but also I don't love to be overwhelmed. One thing, and that's what I'll do. So let's talk about it. Generative AI is a part of everything that we're doing right now, and can help or hinder RSI. It's here, so I'm not going to take time right now to debate the merits. It's existing and it's doing what it's doing, but it is our responsibility, especially if we're creating community, to steward our students through what using it looks like or doesn't look like. Going back to that transparent expectation, what are you expecting students to do with it or not do with it? Also, be honest with yourself. What are you using it for? And telling your students that. Because there is this elephant in the room where we don't talk about the instructors, the faculty, the staff who are also using it and sharing how we are using it and how this is the way it should or shouldn't be used on our end. So to that, we have created in my distance education team an AI statement to add in your syllabus, in your welcome letter or your orientation module, so that students know what am I expect from you, the student, but also what am I, the teacher, doing with it, and how will I use it, and hold myself accountable for AI usage in the classroom. Add reminders on assignments, announcements, and beyond. Students have a hard time remembering what is the expectation in this class versus this class. Lift that burden and remind them in the moment. If they are not allowed to use AI on a certain assignment, remind them of that. If they are, but it's only in a specific way, remind them of that in the moment so they know. Show your students what it looks like to be a good digital citizen. And this is a phrase that I love to use in the way that I describe how we interact with technology. It's another space for good citizenship in online spaces, digital spaces, or on campus spaces that include technology. We have to be the examples. So when we are using technology or AI in our classes, we want to show them what it looks like to do that in a way that supports learning. And discuss the effects of AI. This is something that I've been to a lot of presentations, but I have yet for people to sit there and actually talk about the environmental effects or the effects on communities, low-income communities, Black and Brown communities, where they're building these data centers. Let's not skip that part, because if we want to build an intentional community, then we need to be discussing all of the things that are happening. Students want to know about these things. They just don't know where to start. So make that a part of the conversation. And if that's something you want to add into your statement, add it in there. I plan on redesigning some of my modules to include these things in there, because I find it important that my students know. And where else will they get the information, and will it be right if I don't support them in learning about it? So let's keep data usage and ethics in the forefront when using AI platforms. My campus right now is having a large conversation around student privacy. And I feel like a lot of other campuses are probably having that right now too. So some of this is more about the student privacy side, but I like to start with the why, which is how I built this presentation today. Why are we using AI in this space? Sometimes there's an answer and sometimes there's not. So if you haven't asked yourself that question, why am I using it, or why am I not allowing students to use it? It's a good place to start. Because if you're asking them to sign up for something, even if it's not AI, it's just a third-party platform, if you're asking them to sign up, you're asking them to give away their student information, their personal information. So what is the why? Have a backup plan and allow students to opt out if they don't feel comfortable. If they don't want to use AI, give them something else that they can do that is the same access. Review a HECVET or a VPAT. These are two things that are technology-based documents for a tool. Your HECVET is about student security information. So what does that information go? What does it do, and who gets it? Do they sell it? And a VPAT is your accessibility statement about that tool. So you want to be familiar with what these things are when it pertains to a third-party tool that you are using in your class. If you're not sure, reach out to your IT manager, your distance education coordinator, and they can help you through this process. But it is something we should start considering as we are bringing in more technology that is collecting information. If you're not sure what to do, like it's all too much and I just don't know, think to yourself, how would I feel if my students were required to scan their face to use this technology? to divulge their personal contact information that may be used to train AI, to upload their personal work to review or to review the work of others with AI, making private musings public. This is all public technology. So we want to think about that. And we should let them know. Be honest with your students. And that's why we can offer that opt-out option for them. So I saw a question in the chat for an example. Of course I have it for you. I'm going to show it to you right now. So I have some examples here. These are some of the things that I mentioned may not open for you, but I will open them right now so I can show you what they look like. Some of these are public. So bring your students in and let them know what's happening. I have a digital citizenship statement, which you are welcome to copy and paste. If it loads, there we go. It's short and sweet. I have a much longer version sometimes that I use depending on what I'm teaching, but reminds students this is what our expectations are in this class. This is how I expect you to interact with your peers. I have this AI statement. Again, this one is public, so you're welcome to access it using that link. This is specific to Diablo Valley College, where I am, and was built in tandem with the rest of our DE team. So there's some extra information in here that is specific to DVC, but it is a great place to start. And then this year, we also created an RSI statement. We really love a statement, and we want to put it everywhere. So this is actually from my distance education coordinator. And this is the promise that they made to their class this year around RSI. And the feedback that they got was really fantastic. Students were excited to know what the expectation were, and they actually emailed them to tell them that, which I thought was really cute. So now they know in an online course, this is actually what's supposed to be happening. And students had agency so that they could know. And then lastly, technology reminders, like I had said, put them everywhere that you possibly can. This is just an AI discussion template, like where we would create a discussion board that asks students to use AI to do something. There's a reminder space in here of how you would want them to use it. Down here in these tips and resources, I could add a bunch of resources, reminders for students so that they know how I expect them to use it. Okay, and I have some more examples I want to share, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions. So we talked about building community through whole student care. These are just some of those examples. So this is an example that one of my friends uses in their classes called box breathing, which might be familiar to some of you who enjoy yoga and things like that. But it is a breathing practice to get everybody kind of on the same wavelength. You can do this in person. You can do it online. I actually built it into an online course. You could use playlists and media sharing like I tried to at the beginning of this, or creating safe spaces for conversation. If you have a minute later, watch the daily dedications video. It's really a cool video of an instructor who at the beginning of every class starts with a daily dedication. This is what my online body centering practice looks like. In this module, my learners are reading a lot about decentering colonialized grading, which is a big topic. And so I wanted to give them an intentional space to breathe because it's a lot to digest. So this is from the book, My Grandmother's Hands, which if you have not read it, it is a really great one. And there's a video that they can watch later, but this just allows them personal space. I'm not grading this. This is just for them in the module if they want to take a moment and breathe. Casual conversations. We talked a little bit about this earlier, so I'm just going to breeze through this. You can have a Q&A. Let students set up study groups, or you can set them up. Areas where they can just be social and get to know each other. You can grade these spaces as well if you want to build check-ins. That feedback is the important piece. So I'm giving students feedback. This is one from my course that I like to use. Sometimes I find that being silly is the best way to get an honest answer. That may not work for you. Choose what works for you. As you build community, it works for me. So this is their check-in, 1 to 5. How am I feeling? Of course, there is an accessible text-only transcript to make sure that students can access it, same access. But it gives them the opportunity to say, this module was really hard and I feel bad about myself without saying that out loud. So then I know, who do I need to outreach this week? Who needs to come to office hours? And it's gentle this way. Students can call themselves out with fun. And then I promised community rituals. So this is a community ritual from a friend of mine who now is a dean of distance education, but formerly an English teacher. And this is her community ritual template. Every week they have a ritual where they share something that is connected to the topic, but is not worth a grade. They just connect to whatever they're reading, whatever they're learning, and have their own personal thoughts around that, which this page should also be public and you should be able to take a look at it. I know I'm getting up to time, so I'm gonna just pause at this slide and then see if there are questions, because I know you also need time at the end too.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
There was a question I'm remembering again to talk low. I think I started off very loud. There was a question from Diana in the Q&A asking, what do you do with discussion when students don't reply?
If it's a graded discussion, I always include a template so that I lift that burden from students of what is it supposed to look like. And I sort of give them, I mean, you saw a little bit here. I do the same thing for my students. This I did for instructors to copy and paste and fill in, but I would do the same thing for my students so that they could see what a successful response looks like. I think it also is a time for us to examine what the discussion board is asking then. If students aren't replying to one particular discussion board, let's look at that discussion board and see how we can make some changes, maybe make it a little bit more authentic and get students involved in their learning, because sometimes that discussion fatigue can hit, and we need to rethink the way that we've built our discussion boards.
Well, I'll do one more question and then I'll do the closing announcements, and then I'm sure we'll probably have more time, but just to make sure. Mohammed asked, I teach an asynchronous online course. How can I best use these ideas?
These all came from my asynchronous online course. So I think a good place to start is with intention. I love the comment I'm seeing from Elizabeth in the chat right now, needing to spend more time in building community and less time on the functionality and grading because there's not enough time connecting. I think that's a really good place to start. One piece of advice I offer all of the teachers that I work with, regardless of whether or not they're new or have been here forever, is if you are buried in grading, what are you grading and why? What is the point? And if you're grading this assignment because you've always done it, but you don't actually go back to it and use it for anything or provide feedback to students on it, let's pause and take a look at purpose. And we can give ourselves the same grace to build community that we want to give to our students. So start there and figure out, where can I build these spaces intentionally? And I don't have it in this presentation, but usually when I do like an introduction to RSI, I show one of my own modules with arrows that point out the intentional spaces. Start by looking at one module and saying, where are students interacting with me? Where am I interacting with them? Where are students interacting with each other? And if you're not finding those spaces, that's a good place to start.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I just want to share some closing remarks. And if we have another few minutes, we will answer any questions. Before you go, please check the chat for the survey link and take a moment to complete it. I dropped it in the chat. I'll drop it in again in a few moments. You'll receive a copy of your responses, which can serve as verification for your attendance. And if you encounter any issues or have any questions, you can reach out to support@cbc.edu for assistance. We also encourage you to explore other webinars that we have coming up this semester, and I'll also drop the link for that in the chat. Lastly, this webinar and its associated slides will be available on the CBC at One webinar webpage. Please allow for a few days for captioning before they're posted. I want to thank our ASL interpreters again, our amazing speaker. Thank you, Christilla, and thank you all for joining us on this morning. I hope you all have a wonderful day. We do have like 3 minutes. If anyone does have a question, wants to drop it in, and Christilla, if you want to respond to it.
Yes, and I was just grabbing the slides link again in case you want it for later. Feel free to access it. And of course, if you have questions, you can reach out. I want to address the one question I see in here. How do you encourage students to participate in non-graded spaces? I think that's up to them in the moment, right? We can encourage them by reminding them that it's there and what it's for. Sometimes I do pop in there and add thoughts, but really it's just for them. And if sometimes they use it and they're in there all the time, and sometimes they are not in there. And that's okay too. But I find, like, especially with repetitive, like those community rituals or daily dedications, things like that, students will get involved because it's something that connects to them personally, as opposed to just an open Q&A space.
I know a few
Sometimes,
people.
yeah, they just want to focus on their grade, and that's okay too. Go ahead, Anwar.
I was just going to say I dropped the survey again in the chat because I got a
Thank
separate
you.
messages for it.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. With that, we will end today's webinar. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.